You keep telling yourself you need one last conversation, one last explanation, one final message. You tell yourself that if they would only admit what they did, apologize sincerely, or explain why they changed, you could finally move on. That is the lie keeping you trapped. You are not searching for closure. You are begging for permission to let go. And every day you wait for that permission, you hand more power to the person who already took enough from you. The most dangerous prison has no walls. It exists inside your own mind. It is built from unanswered questions, replayed conversations, imagined scenarios, and the desperate hope that one day everything will suddenly make sense. But it never does. The people who hurt you rarely become the people who heal you. Robert Greene understood this long ago. Human nature does not reward emotional dependence. It exploits it. Today you will learn a ruthless principle found throughout Greene's work and echoed by Machiavelli centuries before him. Never chase closure. Force it instead. Because closure is not something another person gives you. It is something you seize by withdrawing your attention, reclaiming your dignity, and refusing to negotiate with reality any longer. Look carefully at your own behavior. How many times have you reopened a conversation that should have ended? How many paragraphs have you typed, deleted, rewritten, and finally sent? How many nights have you imagined what you should have said? How many mornings have you checked your phone hoping their name would appear? Stop. Every one of those actions communicates the same silent message. My peace depends on your response. That sentence alone places you beneath them. Greene's Law 4 tells you to always say less than necessary. Yet when people are wounded, they do the exact opposite. They explain endlessly. They justify themselves. They confess every emotion. They write essays when a single sentence would have been enough. Why? Because pain creates the illusion that more words produce more understanding. They don't. Words only have power when the other person wants to understand. If they have already decided not to, every additional sentence simply becomes another brick in the prison you are building for yourself. Imagine chasing smoke. The faster you run, the further it escapes. Eventually you're exhausted, covered in ash, and still empty-handed. Closure behaves the same way. The harder you pursue it from someone else, the more impossible it becomes to catch. Now consider something Greene repeatedly demonstrates through history. Kings never begged defeated enemies for explanations. Great strategists never paused in the middle of war demanding emotional clarity. They accepted reality first. Strategy always begins where denial ends. This is the first brutal lesson. Stop confusing unanswered questions with unfinished business. They are not the same thing. Sometimes the unanswered question is the answer. Why didn't they call? Because they chose not to. Why didn't they fight for the relationship? Because they decided it wasn't worth fighting for. Why did they betray your trust? Because in that moment, their desire outweighed their loyalty. You may not like those answers. But reality does not negotiate with comfort. The human mind hates uncertainty. It would rather believe a painful lie than accept an incomplete truth. Greene explores this throughout the laws of human nature. We invent stories because stories feel safer than ambiguity. He must be confused. She probably needs space. They'll come back when they realize. Listen carefully. Hope is valuable only when it produces action. When it produces paralysis, it becomes poison. This brings us to the second lesson. Your obsession with closure has almost nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with your ego. That sounds harsh. Good truth usually does. Your ego cannot tolerate rejection, because rejection attacks the image you built of yourself. You believed you were irreplaceable, loyal, necessary. Then reality challenged that belief. Now your ego demands evidence that you still mattered. That is why you keep seeking explanations. Not to understand them, to repair your own reflection. Imagine standing before a mirror that suddenly cracks. Most people try desperately to glue every broken piece back together. A wiser person simply replaces the mirror. Your identity should never depend on someone else's opinion in the first place. Law 25 says recreate yourself. Notice the wording. Not defend yourself. Not explain yourself. Recreate yourself. That law alone destroys the need for closure. Because someone who constantly recreates themselves does not spend years mourning versions of themselves that no longer exist. Let's talk about emotional debt. Every relationship creates an invisible account. You invest time, attention, trust, energy, dreams. When it ends badly, you feel cheated. You want repayment, you want apologies, confessions, justice. But here is the brutal truth. Some debts will never be repaid. Accepting that reality is the price of freedom. Imagine lending someone a fortune knowing they disappeared forever. Would you spend the rest of your life standing outside an empty house, waiting for repayment? Or would you eventually accept the loss and rebuild your wealth? Your emotional life deserves the same logic. Stop standing outside abandoned houses. Build a new one. This brings us naturally to the third lesson. Silence is not passive. Silence is strategic. Most people misunderstand silence because they confuse it with surrender. It isn't. Sometimes silence is the loudest declaration of self-respect you will ever make. Greene's Law 16 tells you to use absence to increase respect and honor. Notice he did not say use arguments. He did not say use emotional speeches. He said absence. Absence creates space. Space creates curiosity. Curiosity creates psychological pressure. When you keep sending messages after someone has already withdrawn, you remove all pressure from them and place it entirely upon yourself. Think about luxury brands. Why does a waiting list increase desire? Because scarcity changes perception. Now think about your own attention. If you continue offering it freely to someone who has already rejected it, you transform yourself into discounted merchandise. Available, predictable, ordinary. Instead, disappear not as a game, as a decision. Stop checking, stop watching, stop waiting. Let your silence become permanent enough that your own mind finally accepts what your heart has been resisting. Because the silence is not for them, it is for you. Now consider the fourth lesson. You are addicted to imaginary conversations. Be honest. How many times have you rehearsed the perfect confrontation? You imagine them apologizing. You imagine yourself delivering the perfect speech. You imagine them finally understanding your pain. Whores disappear. Nothing changes. This is emotional theater. Your mind becomes a cinema where you continuously replay a film that never reaches the ending you want. Every replay strengthens the emotional habit. Neuroscience calls this reinforcement. Greene simply calls it becoming the prisoner of your own passions. Stop directing movies that will never be released. Whenever your mind begins rehearsing another imaginary conversation, interrupt it. Immediately, say to yourself, that conversation exists only in fantasy. Then redirect your attention. Not tomorrow. Immediately. Discipline is built in moments this small. People believe transformation comes from dramatic decisions. It rarely does. It comes from winning tiny internal battles that nobody else ever sees. This leads directly into another uncomfortable truth. You mistake pain for connection. You believe that because you still think about them, the relationship somehow still exists. It doesn't. Memory is not connection. Rumination is not intimacy. Longing is not love. You can spend 10 years emotionally attached to someone who stopped thinking about you 10 days after leaving. That is not loyalty, that is captivity. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack across a desert. Every mile becomes harder. Someone finally asks why you refuse to put it down. You answer, "Because I carried it this far." Do you see the madness? The weight does not become lighter because you have carried it longer. It becomes heavier. So does emotional baggage. The past does not deserve permanent residence simply because it occupied yesterday. This brings us to the fifth lesson, and this is where most people fail, because it demands something far more difficult than forgiveness. It demands indifference. People talk endlessly about forgiveness because it sounds noble. But forgiveness can still keep you emotionally attached. You can forgive someone every single day while secretly hoping they notice your growth, regret their decision, or return asking for another chance. That is not freedom. That is attachment wearing a saint's mask. Indifference is different. Indifference asks for nothing. No apology, no explanation, no revenge, no acknowledgement, nothing. That is why it terrifies people. Your ego whispers, but they should know what they lost. No, that desire is another chain. Your life is not a courtroom, and you are not waiting for a guilty verdict before you can continue living. Machiavelli understood that power belongs to the person who is least emotionally dependent on the outcome. If your peace depends upon another person's remorse, then they still control your inner world without lifting a finger. Imagine a castle under siege. Most rulers strengthen the gates. The wise ruler removes every reason for the enemy to stay. No supplies, no emotional reactions, no desperate negotiations. Eventually the attackers leave because there is nothing left to conquer. Become that castle. Do not feed people access to your emotions after they have forfeited the privilege of protecting them. This is not cruelty, it is discipline. Now let's discuss something even darker. Some people never intended to give you closure in the first place. Ride that again. They benefit from your confusion. Confused people hesitate. They wait. They remain emotionally available. An open door is easier to walk through than a locked one. Some individuals deliberately leave relationships unresolved because uncertainty keeps them psychologically relevant. One unexpected message every few months, a random like on your photograph, a late night. How have you been? Not enough to rebuild, just enough to prevent you from completely moving on. Greene understood this dynamic in The Art of Seduction. The seducer rarely relies on consistency. They rely on intermittent reinforcement, a little attention, then disappearance, then another small reward. The unpredictability becomes addictive. Casinos understand this. You do not become addicted because you always win. You become addicted because you sometimes win. Relationships follow the same psychological trap. One affectionate message erases 6 weeks of silence. One compliment excuses months of neglect. One apology convinces you the pattern has changed. It usually hasn't. Look at their behavior, not your hope. Parts speak louder than promises. This is why forcing closure requires something uncomfortable. You must stop interpreting exceptions as transformations. One good day does not erase 100 bad ones. One honest conversation does not rewrite years of manipulation. One apology does not rebuild destroyed trust. Stop allowing isolated moments to outweigh consistent behavior. Greene's Law 33 reminds you to discover each person's weakness. Here is another uncomfortable reality. Many people discover yours before you discover theirs. They realize you crave reassurance. They notice you cannot tolerate silence. They learn that a single message is enough to pull you back. Once they recognize the pattern, they no longer need to chase you. You chase yourself. Every notification becomes hope. Every vibration becomes possibility. Every silence becomes torture. Who created that prison? Not them. You did. And because you built it, you can dismantle it. Brick by brick, habit by habit, thought by thought. Now consider the sixth lesson. Closure is not an emotion. It is a decision. Most people wait until they no longer feel hurt before moving forward. That day rarely arrives. Feelings follow action more often than action follows feelings. You are waiting for motivation. Discipline is waiting for you. Think about a forest after a wildfire. The old trees are blackened. The ground looks lifeless. If the forest spent years mourning every tree that burned, nothing new would ever grow. Nature never argues with reality. It adapts, it regenerates, it moves. Human beings insist on negotiating with what has already happened. What if I had said this? What if they had stayed? What if things had been different? They weren't. Every minute spent negotiating with the past is a minute stolen from the future. Law 29 tells you to plan all the way to the end. Notice what that requires. Accepting where you actually are. Not where you wish you were. Strategy begins with reality. Fantasy destroys strategy. From this moment forward, replace one question forever. Stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" Instead ask, "What does this make possible?" One question traps you inside yesterday. The other drags you into tomorrow. There is a profound difference. Let's talk about revenge. Because your mind has probably wandered there more than once. You imagine them failing, feeling abandoned, experiencing the same pain they caused you, confessing their mistakes. Watching your success from afar, it feels satisfying for a moment, then reality returns. Revenge is another form of emotional dependence. Your happiness still requires their participation. Greene's Law 15 warns you to crush your enemy totally, but most people misunderstand what the enemy truly is. Sometimes the enemy is not the person. Sometimes the enemy is your attachment to the person. Eat that instead. Kill the obsession. Kill the fantasy. Kill the hope that your future depends upon their regret. That is ruthless. That is final. Imagine holding a burning piece of coal because you intend to throw it at someone else. Who burns first? Always you. Hatred works the same way. So does resentment. So does the endless pursuit of closure. Drop it. Not because they deserve peace, because you do. Now we arrive at the deepest lesson of all. Your identity has quietly organized itself around the wound. You introduce yourself through betrayal, through heartbreak, through abandonment. Every story begins with what they did. Notice what has happened. Your pain has become your personality. That is the final victory of the person who hurt you. Not because they intended it, because you allowed it. Robert Greene writes repeatedly about transformation. In Mastery, he reminds us that growth demands abandoning obsolete versions of ourselves. The old identity cannot accompany you into the future. Imagine a snake refusing to shed its skin. Eventually, the skin becomes a prison. Movement slows, growth stops. Survival itself becomes impossible. Your emotional history works exactly the same way. You cannot carry every betrayal into every new relationship. You cannot punish strangers for wounds created by someone else. You cannot build tomorrow while living inside yesterday's identity. So tear it off, not gently, completely. The person who was desperate for explanations, let them go. The person who measured worth by someone else's attention, let them go. The person who waited by the phone hoping for one final message, let them go. The person who believed closure could arrive in someone else's words, let them go. They served their purpose. Now they are dead weight. From this point forward, become like the ocean. Ships arrive, ships leave, storms come, storms pass. The ocean never begs a departing ship to return. It never chases the tide, It never questions its own depth because one vessel disappeared over the horizon. Its power comes from remaining what it is, regardless of who enters or leaves. Become that vast, become that calm, become that impossible to shake. And finally, this brings us to the last lesson, the one that separates people who remain prisoners of their past from those who become impossible to manipulate. You believe closure is the end of a relationship. It isn't. Closure is the end of your dependence on the relationship. There is an enormous difference. The relationship may have ended months ago, years ago, perhaps even yesterday. But if your mood still rises and falls based on whether they watch your stories, whether they mention your name, whether a mutual friend brings them up, then emotionally, the relationship never ended. It merely changed form. This is why Greene insists that mastery begins with mastery over yourself. Before you can command influence, command respect, or command power, you must first command your own attention. Attention is your greatest currency. Every thought you repeatedly invest becomes stronger. Every memory you revisit becomes more vivid. Every wound you rehearse becomes more permanent. Most people spend their attention like careless gamblers. They wake up and immediately think about the person who betrayed them. They replay the conversation during breakfast. They check social media before lunch. They imagine different endings before bed. Then they wonder why healing feels impossible. Healing is impossible because your attention never left the crime scene. Imagine a detective arriving at a burned-down building. His job is to investigate, not to move in. Yet that is exactly what you have done. You built a home inside yesterday's disaster. Leave close, the door locked it, never return. This is the brutal difference between memory and identity. Memory says, that happened. Identity says, that is who I am. One informs you, the other imprisons you. Choose carefully. Now consider one of the oldest psychological traps in history. The sunk cost fallacy. You tell yourself, I invested too much to walk away. I gave them years. I sacrificed everything. So I need answers. No, the years are already gone. Nothing you do today can recover them. The only question that matters is whether you are willing to sacrifice tomorrow as well. Stop paying interest on emotional debts that should have been written off long ago. Successful investors know when to cut their losses. Successful strategists know when to abandon a losing position. Successful people understand that persistence is admirable only when the direction is correct. Detachment in the wrong direction is self-destruction. Machiavelli would never advise defending a city that could no longer be saved. He would preserve his strength for the next battle. You should do the same. Preserve your energy. Preserve your focus. Preserve your future. Another brutal truth. Some people will never understand the damage they caused. Not because they are evil, because they experience reality differently than you do. The manipulator remembers convenience. The loyal person remembers promises. The liar remembers excuses. The honest person remembers trust. You are expecting someone with a different moral framework to interpret events through yours. That expectation creates endless disappointment. Stop demanding self-awareness from people who benefit from avoiding it. Stop expecting accountability from people who have built their lives escaping responsibility. Reality does not become unfair because someone refuses to admit the truth. Reality simply becomes clearer. Clarity is enough. Now let's talk about the final test. One day they may come back. Not because they changed, because circumstances changed. Their options disappeared. Their loneliness increased. Their curiosity returned. Or perhaps they simply realized you were no longer available. This is where your transformation is measured. Not when they leave, when they return. Will you mistake familiarity for destiny? Will you confuse nostalgia with compatibility? Will you believe a few beautiful words over a long history of ugly actions? Remember this. People can miss your presence without respecting your value. People can want your attention without deserving your trust. People can return without evolving. Observe, don't assume. Greene repeatedly reminds you to judge people by patterns, never performances. Anyone can perform for a day. Character reveals itself over time. Make people earn access through consistency, not promises. Trust slowly. Watch quietly. Decide strategically. Never surrender your peace because someone suddenly became persuasive. Words are cheap. Parties are expensive. Always buy the expensive evidence. And perhaps the darkest truth of all is this. The person you have been waiting for. The one who would finally explain everything. The one who would apologize perfectly. The one who would somehow erase the pain with a single conversation. That person never existed. You created them. You built them from hope, from longing, from imagination. But reality has been standing in front of you the entire time. Reality does not whisper. Reality repeats. If someone repeatedly chose distance, believe the distance. If someone repeatedly chose silence, believe the silence. If someone repeatedly chose themselves over the relationship, believe the choice. You do not need another explanation. You need acceptance. Acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is seeing clearly, and clear vision is where power begins. You are no longer the person waiting outside a locked door, hoping someone will let you back inside. You are the one walking away from the building entirely. You are no longer carrying the weight of unanswered questions as though they define your future. You are putting them down. You are no longer chasing ghosts through the corridors of your own mind. You are reclaiming every ounce of attention they stole from you. This is not about becoming cold. It is about becoming unshakable. You are shedding the dead skin of your old self. The version that begged for explanations, searched for hidden meanings, and measured peace by another person's response is disappearing. In its place stands someone who understands Robert Greene's ruthless rule. Power belongs to the person who decides the story is over, even when the other person never says goodbye. You do not force closure by demanding one final conversation. You force it by refusing to let the past negotiate another day of your future. That is not a tactic. That is an identity. Now ask yourself one brutally honest question. What relationship, betrayal, or disappointment have you been keeping alive simply because you refuse to close the door yourself? Write your answer in the comments, or write it down where only you can see it. The moment you name it, you begin taking your power back. And if you're committed to mastering the laws of power, understanding human nature, and becoming impossible to manipulate, subscribe and continue this journey. The next lesson may be the one that changes your life forever.